about the theories of crime causation by Glenda C. Panugaling, PDH, and Jerry G. Cano, PhD. Before we going to proceed in our topic, we should have our learning objectives. First, enable to practice self-confidence in reading reports. Second, learn what capabilities you have as you read your criminologies through your video reporting. Third, discover the theories of crime causation through your own research. And lastly, know the persons who found such theories. So, first is the classical theories of crime causation. These is scientific methods to study the nature, extent, cause, and control of crimes. In this context, the topic at hand intends to cover one of the four aspects of criminological studies, that is, the causes of crime. Rational choice theory. It states that individuals use rational calculation to make rational choice and achieve outcomes that are aligned with their own personal objectives. These results are also associated with maximizing an individual's self-interest. Using rational choice theory is expected to result in outcomes that provide people with the greatest benefit and satisfaction, given the limited option they have available. Also, rational choice theory was first presented by Ronald V. Clark and Derek B. Cornish in 1986 in the Reasoning Criminal. Rational choice perspective on offending 293 states the rationale behind the theory is that people commit crime if it is in their own best interest. However, rational choice theory origin date back centuries. Philosopher Adam Smith is considered the originator of rational choice theory. His essay, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, from 1776, proposed human nature's tendency toward self-interest resulted in prosperity. So rational choice theory it was well thought before it was executed, or ito yung pinag-isipan muna ng mabuti bago ginawa o bago gawin. Routine activity theory is based on the assumption that crime can be committed by anyone who has the opportunity. The theory also states that victims are given choices or whatever to be victims, mainly by not placing themselves in situation where a crime can be committed against them. Also, it is routine activity theory is a subfield of crime opportunity theory that focuses on situations of crime. It was first proposed by Marcus Felson and Lawrence E. Cohen in their explanation of crime rate changes in the United States between 1947 and 1974. Cohen and Felson originally developed routine activities theory to explain why crime rates in many Western countries increased instead of decreased between the 1950s and the 1970s. Many older criminological theories had said that crime is related to poverty. If poverty goes down, the crime goes down. Lifestyle theory asserts that crime is developmental process guided by an ongoing interaction between three variables, which is incentive, opportunity, and choice. By the time the individual enters the third, maintenance phase of a criminal lifestyle, incentive has changed once again, this time to fear of change. The lifestyle exposure theory was developed by Hendelang, Gottfredson, and Garofalo. Lifestyle are patterned, regular, recurrent, prevalent, or routine activities. Kennedy and Ford, 1990, 208, summarized the lifestyle exposure model. The general deterrence and specific deterrence theory. The general deterrence, ito yung tumutukoy sa lahat ng tao, and a specific deterrence, ito ay tumutukoy sa isang tao lamang. The general deterrence can be defined as the impact of the threat of legal punishment on the public at large. Specific deterrence can be seen as the impact of the actual legal punishment and those who are apprehended. Two utilitarian philosophers of the 18th century, Cesare Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham, formulated the deterrence theory as both an explanation of crime and a method of reducing it. The victim precipitation theory suggests that the characteristic of the victim precipitate the crime. That is, a criminal could single out a victim because the victim is of a certain ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. Victim precipitation is often regarded as a form of victim blaming. The victim blaming perspective, when applied to rape, contends that the victim contributes to his or her own rape because of his or her actions. The phrase victim precipitation was first introduced by 21st century criminologist Marvin Wolfgang in his article entitled Victim Precipitated Criminal Homicide. In this theory, Wolfgang described the victim as the first in the homicide drama to use physical force against his subsequent slayer. Incipitation theory argues that reduction in crime rates are achieved through higher imprisonment rates since the offender cannot commit new crimes while incarcerated. According to Song Man Kang, Hanyang University, the crime-reducing effect of incarceration is arguably the most important component of the social gains from incarceration. Incarceration physically separates high-risk criminals from communities and prevent them from committing new crimes, while in prison incipitation effect. Tougher sentencing laws and increased prison population may also lower crime by deterring potential criminals who observe that serious crime lead to serious penalties and adjust their expected cost of criminal activities. Deterrent effect. Number 2 is the psychological theories of crime causation. First, the psychodynamic theory and the psychosocial stages of human development. The psychodynamic theory states that events in our childhood have a great influence in our adult lives, shaping our personality. Events that occur in childhood can remain into the unconscious and cause problems as adults. Sigmund Freud. Number 2 is the psychological theories of crime causation. First, the psychodynamic theory and the psychosocial stages of human development. Psychodynamic theory states that events in our childhood have a great influence in our adult lives, shaping our personality. Events that occur in childhood can remain into the unconscious and cause problems as adults. Sigmund Freud proposed that personality development in childhood takes place during 5 psychosexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and the genital stages. Behavioral theory is a popular concept that focuses positive reinforcement. John B. Watson is known as the father of behaviorism within psychology. John B. Watson, in 1878 to 1958, was an influential American psychologist whose most famous work occurred during the early 21st century at Johns Hopkins University. Social learning theory suggests that social behavior is learned by observing and imitating the behavior of others, while behavioral psychology focuses on how the environment and reinforcements affect behavior. Bandura put forth that individual can learn behavior through observation. Psychologist Albert Bandura developed the social learning theory as an alternative to the earlier work of fellow psychologist B.F. Skinner, known for his influence on behaviorism. Cognitive theory is an approach to psychology that attempts to explain human behavior by understanding your thought processes. For example, a therapist is using principles of cognitive theory when they teach you how to identify maladaptive thought patterns and transform them into constructive ones. Perhaps the most significant contributor to developmental cognitive theory was Jean Piaget in 1896 to 1980. Piaget 1952, he observed infants in a context and used movement to understand what children were thinking. Moral development theory focuses on how children develop morality and moral reasoning. Culver's theory suggests that moral development occurs in a series of 6 stages. The theory also suggests that moral logic is primarily focused on seeking and maintaining justice. American psychologist Lawrence Culver's developed one of the best-known theories exploring some of these basic questions. His work modified and expanded upon Jean Piaget's previous work but was more centered on explaining how children develop moral reasoning. Intergenerational transmission theory refers to the transfer of individual abilities, traits, behaviors, and outcomes from parents to their children. Economists have largely focused on the intergenerational transmission of educational attainment, earnings and income, wealth, fertility decisions, and welfareism. The concept of family solidarity or cohesion, as proposed by Vern Bingson and his colleagues in 1985, has been the focus of much research into intergenerational transmission over the past 2 decades. Alternative theory. Alternative theory is a set of statements or principles devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially one that has been repeatedly tested or is widely accepted and can be used to make predictions about natural phenomena. Alternative theory was primarily developed by the American philosopher Fred Driscoll. Differential association reinforcement theory. The theory behind differential enforcement is that people tend to repeat behaviors that are reinforced or rewarded and are less likely to continue behaviors that aren't reinforced. Differential reinforcement consists of 2 components, which is reinforcing the appropriate behavior, purchased and published as a differential association reinforcement theory of criminal behavior. 1966 drew upon earlier work by the American criminologist Edwin Sutherland and the American psychologist B.F. Skinner. E-sync conditioning theory argues strongly that biological predispositions toward certain personality traits combined with conditioning and socialization during childhood in order to create our personality. This became the inspiration for Hans E-sync theory. Hans E-sync was born in Germany on March 4, 1916. His parents were actors who divorced when he was only 2, and so Hans was raised by his grandmother. He left there when he was 18 years old when the Nazis came to power. Integrated theory is a way to recognize commonalities in the theories to make a synthesis of the theories in order to have a single theory that is superior to any of those individual theories. Conceptual integration and propositional integration are the two main ways of theory integration. In 1979, Delbert Elliott and his colleagues proposed one of the more widely recognized integrated theories, Elliott, Agathon, and Cantor, 1979. Borrowing concepts from strain, social learning, and social control theories, they propose that individuals follow one of two pathways into delinquency. Maternal deprivation and attachment theory suggests that continual disruption of the attachment between infant and primary caregiver could result in a long-term cognitive, social, and emotional difficulties for that infant. Bowlby originally believed that effects could be permanent and irreversible. John Bowlby believed that the relationship between the infant and his mother during the first 5 years of life was most crucial to socialization. He believed that this disruption of his primary relationship could lead to a higher incidence of juvenile delinquency, emotional difficulties, and antisocial behavior. Number 3 is the sociological theories of crime causation. The social disorganization theory suggests that the person's residential location is more significant than the person's characteristics when predicting criminal activity, and the juveniles living in these areas acquire criminality by culture's approval within the disadvantaged urban neighborhoods. Social disorganization theory grew out of research conducted in Chicago by Shaw and Mackay. See how Shaw and Mackay, 1942. Concentric zone theory sets concentric zones around the central area, defined by the residential composition, moving from the very poor and socially deviant. In the inner zone of transition, the peripheral suburban computer ring. It is one of the earliest theoretical models to explain urban social structures. It was created by sociologist Ernest Burgess in 1925. Anomy theory is the most people strive to achieve culturally recognized goals. A state of anomy develops when access to these goals is blocked to entire groups of people or individuals. The result is a deviant behavior characterized by rebellion, retreat, ritualism, innovation, and/or conformity. Emily Durkheim, The foundations of anomie theory, the French sociologist Émile Durkheim introduced anomie as a sociological concept in his first major work, The Division of Labor in Society, and then extends it in his paradigmatic study Suicide. Strain theory. A sociology and criminology states that social structures within society weigh pressure citizens to commit crime. Emile Durkheim developed the first modern strain theory of crime and deviance, but Merton's classic strain theory and its offshoots came to dominate criminology during the middle part of the 21st century. Relative deprivation theory suggests that people who feel they are being deprived of something considered essential in their society, take money, rights, political voice, or status, will organize or join social movements dedicated to obtaining the things of which development of the concept of relative deprivation is often attributed to American sociologist Robert K. Merton, whose study of American soldiers during World War II revealed that soldiers in the military police were far less satisfied with their opportunities for promotion than regular GIS. General strain theory is based on three different factors: failure to achieve a goal, existence of harmful impulses, and the removal of positive impulses. GCT suggests that negative experience can lead to stress not only that are induced. General strain theory, or the GST, is a theory of technology developed by faculties. However, criminal responsibility, also known as the insanity defense, refers to the time of the alleged offense and more specifically asks the question whether the defendant had the mental capacity to distinguish between right and wrong at the time of the alleged offense and could control his or her conduct accordingly. Premenstrual syndrome is a combination of symptoms that many women get about a week or two before their period. Most women, over 90%, say they get some premenstrual symptoms such as bloating, headaches, and moodiness. According to Mayo Clinic Organization, BMS has a wide variety of signs and symptoms, including mood swings, tender breast, food cravings, fatigue, irritability, and depression. It's estimated that as many as 3 of every 4 menstruating women have experienced some form of premenstrual syndrome. The battered child syndrome is a disease in which children are physically abused. The battered child syndrome is a form of child abuse. Not until the 19th century were children granted the same legal status as a domesticated animals in regard to protection against cruelty and a neglect. Henry Kempe and his colleagues were the first to recognize and identify child abuse and neglect into defining paper the battered child syndrome. Battered woman syndrome is a psychological condition that can develop when a person experiences abuse, usually at the hands of an intimate partner. People who find themselves in an abusive relationship often do not feel safe or happy. Psychotherapist Lanier Walker developed the concept of battered woman syndrome in the late 1970s. She wanted to describe the unique pattern of behavior and emotion that can develop when a person experiences abuse and as they try to find ways to survive the situation. Postpartum stress syndrome and postpartum psychosis is a serious mental health illness that can affect someone soon after having a baby. Some new moms experience a more severe, long-lasting form of depression known as postpartum depression. Rarely, an extreme mood disorder called postpartum psychosis also may develop after childbirth. Postpartum depression isn't a character flaw or a weakness. Sometimes it's simply a complication of giving birth. If you have postpartum depression, prompt treatment can help you manage your symptoms and help you bond with your baby. Number 6 is a political and a social conflict theories of crime procession. Marxist criminology is one of the schools of criminology. As a conflict criminology, it focuses on why things change, identifying the destructive forces in industrialized societies, and describing how society is divided by power, wealth, prestige, and the perceptions of the world. The term Marxism or Marxism was popularized by Karl Kautsky, who considered himself an orthodox Marxist during the dispute between the Orthodox and revisionist followers of Marx. The conflict theory, first purported by Karl Marx, is a theory that society is in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition for limited resources. Conflict theory holds that social order is maintained by domination of power rather than by consensus and conformity. Social reality of crime. Under the theory of the social reality of crime is held to be a legal definition of human conduct created by agents of the dominant class in a politically organized society. Definition of crime are in turn applied by the class that has the power to shape the enforcement and administration of criminal law. Richard Quinist, the social reality of crime remains an eloquent and important statement on crime, law, and justice. The left realism is that left realism is just one political ideology that focuses on the causes of crime and deviance. Left realists believe that living in a capitalistic society, as in a social where private entities control trade and industry instead of the state, is the main cause for crime. Since the early 1980s, number of sociologists have developed a perspective on crime and deviance, usually referred to as left realism. Among the most prominent supporters of this perspective are Jock Young and John Lea, Roger Matthews, and Richard Kelsey. Postmodern theory. The postmodern theory or postmodernism is associated with relativism and a focus on ideology in the maintenance of economic and political power. Postmodernists are generally skeptical or explanation which claim to be valid for all groups, cultures, traditions, or races, and describe truth as relative. The postmodern view of language and discourse is due largely to the French philosopher and literary theorist Jacques Derrida in 1930 to 2004. The originator and leading practitioner of deconstruction. Institutive constitutive. It states that recognition of an entity as a state isn't automatic. A state is only a state when it is recognized as such, and other states have a considerable discretion in recognized or not. Moreover, only upon recognition by those other states does the new state exist, at least in a legal sense. Founded by Dragan Milovanovic and Stuart Henry, with contributions from Greg Barak and Rose Arrigo. This constitutive theory was based on postmodernist concept of social theory applied to crime and criminal justice, and formed a new subfield of critical criminology. Conservatism and liberalism theory is a political ideology combining conservative policies with liberal stances, especially on economic issues but also on social matters, representing a brand of political conservatism strongly influenced by liberalism. Edmund Burke in 1929 to 1797 has been widely regarded as the philosophical founder of modern conservatism, while philosopher John Locke is often created by founding liberalism as a distinct tradition based on the social contract, arguing that each man has a natural right to life, liberty, and property, and governments must not violate these rights. Radicalism is a conflict ideology which bases perspectives on crime and law in the belief that capitalized societies precipitate and define crime as the owners of the means of production use their power to enact laws that will control the working class and threats to the power of the ruling class. The truly was pioneered by Justus von Liebig and Friedrich Wöhler and Augustin Laurent around 1830 and is not related to the modern understanding of free radicals. The identity fusion theory poses that strongly fused individuals feel kin-like bonds with other group members, even ones with whom they may have had little or no contact. Several studies have garnered empirical support for the relationalities principle. Social identity truly developed from a series of studies, frequently called minimal group studies, conducted by the British social psychologist Henry Tadgfield and his colleagues in the early 1970s. Thank you very much. I am Romini G. Gabuya, BS Criminology 2, and thank you for listening and have a good morning. Good day.